Hello everyone, here is Afra Siab. Today we are going to solve Cambridge IGCSE Physics Paper 4 Theory Extended. Paper code is 0625 with variant 42, held on February-March 2019. So let's start from question number 1. Question number 1, define acceleration. So here we have to define the acceleration. Acceleration is defined as the gradient of velocity time graph, or it may be defined as the rate of change of velocity of a body with respect to time. So it will be equal to delta V divided by delta T, and it is Vf, that is final velocity, minus Vi initial velocity, over T2 minus T1. T2 is final time and T1 is initial time. So we can define acceleration as the rate of change of velocity with respect to time. It is called acceleration. Part B. Figure 1.1 shows the distance time graph for the journey of a cyclist. So it's a distance time graph that is shown in figure 1.1. We can see here that the distance is taken in meters and it is along y-axis, while the time is taken in seconds and it is taken along x-axis. And there is a curve that shows the journey of cyclist. Part 1. Describe the motion of the cyclist in time between time t is equal to 0 and time t is equal to 15 seconds. So first of all, we have to define the motion of the cyclist between time 0 to 15 seconds. So here we can see a curve, and this curve starts from rest and goes upward. It means that the cyclist accelerating from 0 to 15, because here the body, that is cyclist, here is speeding up. Its speed goes on increasing with the increase in time. So we can simply say that the cyclist is accelerating from 0 to 15. I write here accelerating or moving faster. Here is acceleration or moving faster. Part 2. Time t is equal to 15 second and 30 seconds. So here is 15 second and here is 13 second. We can see here is a curve that is between time t is equal to 15 and 30 second. And this curve is a straight line. The straight line shows that the velocity of body is constant. It means that the body covers equal distance in equal interval of time. You can see here that time increases, its corresponding distance value also increases. So we can simply say that the cyclist is moving with constant speed. So I write here constant speed. Part 3. Time t is equal to 30 seconds and time is equal to 40 seconds. So going back to the graph, from 30 seconds to 40 seconds, we can see that it's a curve. And this curve shows that the acceleration of cyclist is decreasing with the increase in time, or we can simply say that the cyclist is slowing down. Its speed is decreasing with the increase in time. The cyclist is decelerating. I write here deceleration. Or moving slower. Part 2. Calculate for the 40-second journey the average speed. We have to calculate the average speed here. And it's given a distance time graph. And the speed is find out by taking the slope of distance time graph. I write here speed will be equal to distance divided by time. And it is also be equal to the slope of distance time graph. So here we have to calculate the average speed, and it means that we have to divide total distance divided by total time to find out the average speed. So in the question it is given that for the 40-second journey, it means that we have to find out the average speed for the whole journey, because we can see in the graph that the time is at the end is 40 seconds. So we can see that the total time is from 0 to 40, and its corresponding distance that the cyclist covered is from 0 meters to 300 meters, because at this point the distance is 300. In this way we can get the average speed, and I write here V will be equal to total distance here is 300 divided by total time is 40 seconds. So by dividing them we get 7.5. So I write here it is meter per second, the unit of velocity. So the average speed will be equal to 7.5 meter per second. Part 2. The maximum speed. Here we have to calculate the maximum speed. So first of all we have to guess that the where speed is maximum. From 0 to 15 seconds the cyclist is accelerating. It means that its speed is going on increase, and after 15 seconds and up to 30 seconds the speed is constant, but it is still maximum value. So we can simply say that the difference between these two points give the maximum speed. From this point up to 30 seconds and this 15. The difference between these two points gives us the maximum speed, and we also find out the maximum speed by the same formula that the distance divided by time or the slope of distance time graph. So I write here the maximum speed will be equal to distance divided by time. First of all, here time is 30 seconds and first time is 15 seconds. We have to find out its corresponding distance value. By using the ruler, I draw a line on the y-axis. So it will touch at this position. So we can see from here that when time t is equal to 15 seconds, the distance is 70 meters. And when time t is equal to 30 seconds, its corresponding distance is 250 meters. So using these values, we can calculate the maximum speed, and it comes to be 250 minus 70 divided by time is 30 and 15. So I write 30 minus 15. So that the maximum speed comes to be 12 meter per second. I write here 12 meter per second. So it's the maximum value of the speed. Question number 2, part A. State one advantage and one disadvantage of using a wind turbine as a source of electrical energy. So here we have to describe one advantage and one disadvantage of using the wind energy to generate electricity or to get electrical energy from it. So the advantage is that we don't need any kind of fuel to get energy from the wind turbine, or it does not cause any kind of pollution by emitting any sort of gas. So I write here, no fossil fuel need. And the disadvantage is that it may cause the death of birds and the wind is not present all time. So without wind we cannot generate the electrical energy from the wind turbine. That's why it's a disadvantage that wind is not always present. Part B. Figure 2.1 shows a wind turbine. Here is the figure 2.1 in which a wind turbine is shown and the speed of wind turbine is 16 meter per second and area swept out by the turbine blade is also shown. Part 1. The wind blows at a speed of 16 meter per second towards the turbine blades in 1 second. A volume of 24,000 meter cube of air passes through the circular area swept out by the blades. The density of air is 1.3 kg per meter cube. Calculate the mass of air that passes through the circular area swept out by the blades in 1.0 second. Here we have to calculate the mass of air when density and the volume is given. So we can easily calculate the mass. We know that density is defined as mass per unit volume. By using this formula we can easily calculate mass, and m, that is mass, it will be equal to the product of density and volume. So density of air is 1.3 and the volume is 24,000. So I write here 24,000. Mass comes to be 31,000. The unit of mass is kg. So I write here mass is equal to 31,000 kilogram. Part 2. The kinetic energy of the mass of air that passes through the air swept out by the blades. Here we have to find out the value of kinetic energy. We know that the kinetic energy is associated with the motion. So I write here the formula of kinetic energy. It will be equal to half mv square. We know that mass we already calculate, whose value is 31,000 kg, and the velocity is also given, that is 16 meter per second. So I write here 16 and take its square. So the kinetic energy comes to be 4 into 10 की power 6. The unit of energy is joule. So kinetic energy will be equal to 4 into 10 की power 6 joules. Part 2. Suggest why some of the kinetic energy of the air that passes through the circular area swept out by the blades is not converted into electrical energy. So why some of the kinetic energy is not converted into electrical energy? Because the blades cause friction and some of the kinetic energy is used to overcome this friction. So that's why some of the kinetic energy cannot be converted into electrical energy. It do work against the friction. So I write here, some energy is required for opposing the friction of blade. Question number 3, part A. An object is moving in a straight line at constant speed. State 3 ways in which a force may change the motion of object. So, we have to state the 3 different ways in which the force can change the motion of the object. And the first of all, object is moving with the constant speed. So, when we apply a force, it may changes the direction. First point is that it can change the direction. Second point is that it can increase the speed. First of all, object is moving with constant speed. So when we apply a force, its speed may be increased. So I write here, it can increase the speed. Or we can simply say that the object may accelerate when we apply a force. I write here accelerate. Third point is that it can decrease the speed, or we can simply say that when we apply a force, the object may decelerate. So I write here it can decrease speed or decelerate. Part B. Here is a figure 3.1. Figure 3.1 shows an object suspended from two ropes. So this is the object and it is suspended from two ropes. First is this and second rope is this. The weight of the object is 330 Newton. We know that the weight of object is already acting in downward direction and its value is 360 Newtons. The magnitude of the tension in each rope is T and the tension in both of these ropes is equal and it is equal to T. In the space below, determine the tension T by drawing a vector diagram of the force acting on the object. State the scale you have used. Here we have to find out the tension. So first of all, we can see that the object is stationary. It means that the all forces acting on this object will be equal to 0. So I write here when the object is stationary, then acceleration will be equal to 0 because object is stationary, it is not moving, and according to second law of Newton, F is equal to ma. All the forces will also equal to 0, or we can simply say that the net force acting on the object, it will be equal to 0. And here net force are acting in downward direction and there is also a force due to this tension. So simply it is said that all the upward forces will be equal to all downward forces. Both of these forces are equal. So here we can see that the weight is acting in downward direction, so the downward force is due to its weight. And we also have to find out the upward force. So we draw a line from these strings. So I am going to draw this line. I have to draw these on both sides. So these are the two forces that is acting in upward direction due to this string. As the value of tension on both strings are same, so these forces will also be equal. I suppose that the force is X on both of these. And we also have to find out its value by using this relation that all the upward forces is equal to all downward forces. I can write that the upward forces here are acting to, that is x plus x. It will be equal to downward force and it is equal to 360, and this is basically the weight that is acting in downward direction. So it will be 2x and it is equal to 360. So x comes to be 180 newtons. As x is a force, its unit will be Newton. So I write here this x is equal to 180 Newton. So here is also the angle 45. And we have to find out the value of this tension that is acting in this direction. So by using the property that sine theta is equal to perpendicular over hypotenuse. Here it's the angle that is 45 and its hypotenuse is perpendicular because here angle is 90. So we can easily find out the tension that is hypotenuse. I write here sine of 45 degrees will be equal to, here x is equal to 180 divided by hypotenuse tension. So T will be equal to 180 divided by sine 45 and it comes to be 250 newtons. So the value of this tension is equal to 250 newtons. This value is basically 254 but it's approximately equal to 250. So first of all we have to find out the value of tension. Now we also have to draw the diagram with proper scaling. I suppose that in scale I use that 1 centimeter is equal to 50 newtons. Then tension here is 250. I write here tension is equal to 250 newton. It will be equal to 5 centimeter because 250 divided by 50 is equal to 5. Next weight is 360 newtons and it will be equal to 7.2 centimeter because 360 divided by 50 is equal to 7.2. So we have take the scale that 1 centimeter is equal to 50 newtons. I write here in scale that 1 centimeter is equal to 50 newtons. Now I am going to draw the diagram, that is parallelogram. So first of all I draw a straight line. It's my center and it's my center. So here we can see in this diagram that tension value is 5 centimeter and it is acted in this direction at angle 45. So by considering angle 45, I draw a line here. So if I consider that this small box is equal to 1 centimeter and this is 2 centimeter, 4 centimeter, 5 centimeter, I draw a line of 5 centimeter. The second tension is on other side and it is also at angle 45. So I am also drawing it. So here is 2, 4 and 5. it's 5 centimeter. So we also have draw the lines that are parallel to these two at the same angle 45, which is also of the same length. So it's a complete parallelogram. First of all, tension is this and this, and its value is 5 centimeter. Then we draw this side parallel to this one and this side parallel to this one, and all of this has length 5 centimeter. And we know that weight is acting vertically, so we also have mentioned here weight, and its value, of course, it will be equal to 7.2. This is the weight. And its magnitude is 7.2 centimeter. So I write here tension value is equal to 250 newtons, or it is also equal to 5 centimeter. Question number 4, part A. Figure 4.1 shows a mercury barometer. The tube containing the mercury is vertical. So here is a figure 4.1. We can see that it's a mercury barometer and its height is h. Part 1. The height h indicates a value of the atmospheric pressure. State what is contained in the space labeled as. So here is a space x. We have to tell that what thing this space contains. So we can see that there is nothing, it's totally empty. So it's a vacuum. I write here vacuum. Part 2. On a particular day, atmospheric pressure is 1.02 into 10 to the power 5 Pascal. The density of mercury is 13,600 kg per meter cube. Calculate the value of h, that is height, indicated by the barometer. So here we have to calculate the value of height, and we know that the pressure due to the air column P is equal to density, gravitational acceleration, and g. So P is equal to rho gh. Here we have to find out height. So h will be equal to P over rho g. Pressure is given, that is 1.02 into 10 to the power 5 Pascal, divided by the density is 13,600 kilogram per meter cube, and the acceleration due to gravity is 10. So the height comes to be 0.75 meters. It means that this height, it is basically 0.75 meters. So I write here h is equal to 0.75 meters. Part 3. The tube containing mercury is not tilted, so that it makes an angle 10 degree with the vertical. After tilting, there continue to be space above the mercury in the tube. State and explain whether the vertical height of the mercury in the tube is smaller, same, or greater than the value calculated in A part 2. So here we have tilted the tube that contains the mercury in such a way that it makes an angle 10 degree. So first of all, I consider that it's the initial position of the tube. When I tilt, it may move from this position to this one, such that this vertical angle is 10. So we have to tell that what will be the effect on the vertical height. We know that the pressure due to the column depends upon the vertical height. I write here P is equal to rho GH. Here rho is density, that is constant 13,600, and G is acceleration due to gravity. Here P depends upon vertical height. So we can see that as the pressure remains same, so height also remains same when we tilt the tube through 10 degrees. So we can say that the value of height in this case is also be equal to 0.75 meters, because pressure does not changing here. It has a fixed value, that is atmospheric pressure 1.05 into 10 to the power 5 Pascal. So I write here it remains same. Because pressure, density and gravity do not change. Part B. Another mercury barometer in the same room at the same time shows a lower value of H than the barometer in part A. Suggest and explain a reason for the lower value. So going back to the diagram. So here is a figure 4.1. We can see that this space, first of all, it is empty. It does not contain anything. So first of all, we suppose that this space is not empty, but there is the air. When there is a air, so there will be the air particles that apply pressure on the mercury. Due to this, there will be the pressure on the mercury level, and the mercury level moves down. It means that the mercury contract inside this tube, so that its height decrease. It may come at this point when there is a pressure. So we can simply write, due to the presence of the air in S, pressure is exerted on mercury surface and it contracts. Due to which height reduce. Question number 5, part A. State the values of the fixed point of temperature scale. Here we have to tell that what are the values of the fixed point of temperature scale. So these are basically the melting point and boiling point. So the melting point is 0 degree C and the boiling point is 100 degree C. I write here 0 degree C and 100 degree C. These are the fixed point of the temperature scale. Part B. 1. The graduations on a liquid in glass thermometer are equally spaced. For the equal spacing of the graduations to be correct, state part 1, an assumption that is made about the liquid in thermometer. So the liquid expansion will be uniformly. It means that equal expansion for each degree raise of temperature. So I write here the liquid expand uniformly. Part 2. An assumption that is made about the structure of thermometer. Here we have to make the assumption about the structure of the thermometer. So we can say that the capillary tube has constant width throughout the length. So I write here capillary tube has constant width throughout the length. Part 2. Liquid in glass thermometer A has greater range than liquid in glass thermometer B. So here range of A thermometer is greater than range of B thermometer. State one way the design of the thermometer A is different from the thermometer B. So here A and B thermometer has different range. So we know that the length of thermometer depends upon its range. When the range is larger, the length will be larger. So we can say that length is directly proportional to range. It implies that if range of A is greater, then length of A thermometer will be greater as compared to length of thermometer B. So we can simply say that the thermometer A is longer than B. So I write here thermometer A is longer than thermometer B. Part 3. Liquid in glass thermometer C has a greater sensitivity than the liquid in glass thermometer D. State one way the design of the thermometer C is different from the thermometer D. So here we have two liquid in glass thermometer C and D, and the sensitivity of C thermometer is greater as compared to sensitivity of thermometer D. I write here sensitivity for C is greater than D. It means that the liquid in thermometer C has longer expansion rate than D because sensitivity links with the expansion rate. Larger the sensitivity, greater will be the expansion rate. So I write here liquid in thermometer C has greater expansion rate than thermometer D. Moving towards the next part of this question, part C. In the space provided, draw a label diagram of a thermocouple thermometer. Here we have to draw the diagram of thermocouple thermometer. So first of all, we have to know about the components of this thermocouple thermometer. It consists of voltmeter, copper wire, iron wire, and junction. So these are the components of thermocouple thermometer. So first of all, I consider this is iron wire and here is a voltmeter V. These are two junctions. One is hot junction and second is cold junction. This is cold junction. It is voltmeter. This wire is copper wire. And this is also copper wire. And this wire is iron wire. So this is a complete diagram of a thermocouple thermometer. Part 2 suggests when a thermocouple thermometer is more suitable than a liquid in glass thermometer. So because thermocouple thermometer is more suitable than the liquid in glass thermometer because it is used for wide range of temperature. When we use the thermocouple thermometer for wide range of temperature, then it is more suitable. And when it is also used to measure very high or very low temperature. So I write here when range of temperature is high. Or when we have to measure very high or very low temperature. Then we prefer thermocouple thermometer over liquid in glass thermometer. Question number 6. An electrical heater is placed on a floor of a room in a house. The heater is switched on. Part A. State the main process by which thermal energy is transferred to the air in all parts of the room. So thermal energy is transferred through basic three methods: conduction, convection and radiation. But in this case, the transfer of heat through the air is carried by the convection. So I write here convection. Part B. The heater has a power of 1.5 kilowatt. The air in the room has a mass of 65 kg. The specific heat capacity of air is 720 joule per kg per degree C. Part 1. Calculate the time it takes for this heater to raise the temperature of the air in the room from 8 degree C to 15 degree C. So here we have to calculate the time when specific heat capacity, mass and power is given. So first of all, we know that power is equal to energy over time. Here we have to calculate time. So time will be equal to power, energy over power. Power is given, that is 1.5 kilowatt. But energy is not given. First of all, we have to calculate energy, and it will be energy E is equal to C delta T, where M is mass, C is specific heat capacity, and delta T is change in temperature. So energy comes to be mass is given 65 multiplied by specific heat capacity is 720 and change in temperature 15 minus 8. So energy comes to be 3.3 into 10 to the power 6. The unit of energy is joule. So we have calculate energy. Now we put this value of energy into this equation and it becomes 3.3 into 10 to the power 6 divided by power is given, that is 1.5 kilowatt. So 1.5 and kilo is actually 10 to the power 3. So when we calculate time comes to be 220 seconds. So I write here time is equal to 220 seconds. Part 2. State 2 reasons why the time calculated in B part 1 is smaller than the actual time taken to raise the temperature of the air in the room from 8 degrees C to 15 degrees C. So the time that we calculate is smaller than the actual time required to raise the temperature. It is because that heat absorbed by the object in the room and the time required to heat the air which might have entered the room through the slit. That's why the actual time is always greater than the time that we calculate here. So I write here heat absorbed by object in the room. And second reason is that time required to heat air which might have entered room through the slits. So this is the basic reason why the actual time is always greater than the calculated time. Question number 7, part A. In figure 7.1, the small circles represent molecules. The arrow refers to the change of the state from the arrangement of molecules on the left to the arrangement of molecules on right. So here is a figure 7.1 and we can see that these are the molecules and it is labeled with X while it is labeled with Y. Complete the following by writing solid, liquid or gas in each of the blank space. Part 1. Change of the state X in from dash to from. So first of all we can see in X that the molecules are very close to each other and there is a strong intermolecular forces between these molecules. So this is a solid in which the molecules are very close to each other. So I write here from solid to. Now we can see that this diagram is basically for the liquid because there is a small amount of spacing between these molecules and the force of attraction here is smaller as compared to solids. That's why the X changes from solid into liquid. I write here liquid. Part 2. Change of the state Y is from dash to dash. So we can see here it's a Y and this system is basically liquid because the molecules are small distance apart from each other and the force of attraction here is smaller as compared to solids. So I write here liquids. Now we can see this system that there are small number of particles and these are very very large distance apart from each other, and there are very small attractive forces between these molecules. And this system is basically for gas. I write here gas. Part B. Explain in terms of forces between their molecules why gas expand more than solids when they undergoes the same rise in temperature. So when we increase the temperature, gases expand more as compared to solid. So going back to the diagram again, we can see that it's a solid, this is liquid, and gas. The molecules of solid are very close to each other, and there is very small amount of distance between these molecules. This is the basically distance between these molecules, and it is very small. And these molecules are held by stronger attractive forces. When we see this system, the molecules are small apart from each other. There is a small distance between these molecules, but this distance is larger as compared to solids, and there are small amount of forces. There are stronger forces, but small amount of forces as compared to solid. So third system is for gas. We can see here that there is a large amount of spacing between these molecules, and these molecules are very far apart from each other. And there are very small attractive forces between the gas molecules. That's why there is a large spacing between the gas molecules. It's easier to expand gas as compared to liquids or solid. So I write here due to weaker force of attraction between gas molecules, second reason is that easier to increase the separation of gas molecules than solid. Gas molecules than solid. Part C. A cylinder of volume 0.012 meter cube contains a compressed gas at a pressure of 1.8 into 10 to the power 6 Pascal. A valve is opened and all the compressed gas escapes from the cylinder into the atmosphere. The temperature of the gas does not change, so the temperature remains constant. Calculate the volume that the escaped gas occupies at the atmospheric pressure of 1.0 into 10 to the power 5 Pascal. So here we have to calculate volume of the escape gas, and the temperature here is not changing. It means that we can use Boyle's law, because in the Boyle's law we say that pressure is inversely proportional to volume at constant temperature. Here is also temperature does not change, so pressure will be inversely proportional to volume, or we write P1 V1 is equal to P2 V2. Here, using this formula, P1 V1 is equal to P2 V2. We have to calculate the value of V2. It will be equal to P1 V1 over P2. So P1 is 1.8 into 10 to the power 6 multiplied by volume is 0.012. divided by pressure is 1.0 into 10 to the power 5. So the volume comes to be 0.22 meter cube. So we can see here that here is a system. So the total volume of the gas will be equal to the sum of total volume of the gas in the cylinder plus the gas that escapes from the cylinder. I write here total volume it will be equal to volume of the gas in cylinder plus volume of the gas that escaped. In the question, it is given that volume of the escaped gas. It means that we have to find out the volume of escaped gas. So when we find out this, it comes to be V escaped, volume of escaped gas, it will be equal to total volume is 0.22 minus the volume of gas in the cylinder is 0.012. So the volume comes to be 0.21 meter cube. I write here 0.21 meter cube. So this is basically the volume of the escaped gas. Question number 8. Figure 8.1 shows parallel wavefronts of a light wave in ice. The wavefronts are incident on a boundary with air. So here is a figure 8.1 and these are the parallel wavefronts that are incident on the ice-air boundary. The speed of light wave in air is 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second. So this is the speed of light in the air. The refractive index of the ice is 1.3. Part A on figure 8.1, Part 1. Draw the wavefronts of the wave that pass into the air. Part 2. Draw arrows to show the direction of travel of the refracted wave. Part 3. Label the angle of incidence I and angle of refraction R. So going back to the diagram, we can see that these are the parallel wavefronts that is incident on the ice-air boundary, and when we have to find out the refracted angle, we have to draw the normal. In this figure, we can see that these are the incident wavefronts and they fall on the ice-air boundary. In order to draw the refracted rays, we have to follow different steps. First of all, we have to draw normal ray that is normal to this surface. So first of all, I draw this normal. On all of these wavefronts. And we also have mentioned the angle of incidence and angle of refraction. So first of all, angle of incidence is the angle that the incident ray made with the normal ray. So this angle is actually angle of incidence. We have to mention all the angle of incidence. Secondly, we also have to mention the angle of refraction. Similarly, angle of refraction is the angle between the normal ray and refracted ray. For that, we have to draw the refracted ray. As we can see here that the wavefront coming from ice into air. Ice is a denser medium while air is a rare medium. So when the ray of light coming from denser to rare medium, it will bend away from the normal. I write here denser to rare medium, ray bend away from normal. Now we have to draw the refracted ray that bends away from this normal. It will be just like this. This is first. Second one. All of these rays are refracted rays and they must be parallel, and the distance between these, which is also be called wavelength. The distance between all of these waves should also be same. So this angle is basically refracted angle. This is also refracted angle. All of these are the refracted angle. And we also have to draw the direction of wave. It will be perpendicular to these refracted rays. So I am going to draw the direction of wave. It will be in this direction. So this is the direction of wave, and the refracted rays direction is this. Going to the next part of this question. Calculate the speed of light wave in ice. Here we have to calculate the speed of the light wave in ice. For that we use the ratio of speed is equal to refractive index, that is represented by n, and it is equal to c over v. So c is the speed of light. I write here 3 into 10 की power 8. And we have to calculate the speed of light wave. It means that we have to calculate v. So by rearranging, v will be equal to 3 into 10 की power 8 divided by n, that is refractive index, and it is 1.3. So the speed of the light wave comes to be 2.3 into 10 की power 8 meter per second. So this is the value of velocity. I write here 2.3 into 10 की power 8 meter per second. Question number 9. Figure 9.1 shows current potential difference PD graph for a resistor and for thermistor. So in a figure 9.1 we can see that it's a current and potential difference graph, that is for resistor and thermistor. And the current is taken in amperes along y-axis while the potential difference is taken in volt along x-axis. Part A. Calculate the resistance of thermistor when the potential across is 7 volt. So here the potential difference across is given, that is 7 volt, and we have to find out the resistance of thermistor. So we can see in this graph that 7 volt is at position. So I write here 7 volt, and this meets at this point. We have to find out its corresponding value of current. So by using ruler, I draw a line here and find out the current values. So this made the current at this point, and we can see that at this point the current is 4.6 ampere. So we have to find out resistance by using Ohm's law, that V is equal to IR. We can find out the value of resistance by dividing potential difference with current. The potential difference is 7.0 and the value of current here is 4.6. amperes, so that the resistance comes to be 1.5 ohms. I write here the resistance of thermistor is equal to 1.5 ohms. Part B. In table 9.1, tick the boxes that indicate the effect on the resistances of the resistor and of thermistor when the potential difference across them is increased from 0 to 7.0 volt. So here we have mentioned the effect of increase in potential difference on the resistance of both these, resistor and thermistor. So going back to the diagram, here we can see that this line is for resistor and it is a straight line. Using this relation, we can say that the potential difference varies directly with the current, and here R is a constant, that is resistance. So this straight curve shows that the resistance of resistor remains same. It does not change when potential difference changes. So I tick here that the resistance of resistor remains same. Secondly, we also have to check for the thermistor that when we increase the potential difference, what will be the effect on resistance. So we can see here that the resistance of thermistor decrease with increase in potential difference. So I tick here that resistance decrease. Going to the next part. Part C. The thermistor and the resistors are connected in parallel to a 7.0 volt supply. Calculate the current from the supply. Here we have to find out the value of current, and using Ohm's law we know that V is equal to IR. Here thermistor and resistor, both of these components are parallel. And we know that in parallel circuit, the value of potential difference remains same, but the value of current changes. In series combination, the value of potential difference change while the current remains same. So here thermistor and resistor are connected in parallel. It means that the potential difference across both of these components remains same. So 7 volt potential difference is the cross thermistor and also cross resistor. In order to find out the value of current, we also have to know about the value of resistance. So going back to the circuit, we can see that at 7 volt, that is at this point, the corresponding current values are 4.6, that is for both resistor and thermistor. So we can simply say that in the parallel circuit, when we have to find out the total current, we just add all of the individual current. We can see from here that in the parallel combination the current changes. It means that the value of current does not remain same. And from the graph we see that the current across resistor is 4.6 ampere and current across thermistor is also 4.6 ampere. When we have to find out the total current in parallel combination, we add the individual current values. I write here the total current I will be equal to IR plus IT. It will be 4.6 plus 4.6 and its value is 9.2 amperes. So that the total current from the supply will be 9.2 ampere. Part 2. The energy transferred from the supply in 5.0 minutes. Here we have to calculate the energy, and we know that power is rate of transfer of energy. I write here power is equal to energy over time. Here we have to calculate energy. It will be equal to T cross T. In this question we are given just time. We don't know the value of power. So we know that power is the product of potential difference and current. So I write here energy will be equal to VI cross T. Here potential difference is 7.0 volt across both of these components. So I write here V is equal to 7.0 volt, and also the value of current across the supply is 9.2 ampere and current is 9.2 ampere. Time is given, that is 5 minutes. I write here 7 multiplied by 9.2 multiplied by 5. This time is given in minutes. We have to convert this into second and multiply it with 60. So the energy comes to be 19,000 joule. So I write here energy is equal to 19,000 joule. Question number 10, part A. The electrical energy produced by a power station is transmitted over long distances at a very high voltage. Explain why a very high voltage is used. So very high voltage is used to transfer the electrical energy over the long distances. So we know that according to Ohm's law, V is equal to IR, that when the voltage is higher, the current will be smaller. I write here high voltage means that current smaller and when current is smaller, the heat lost by the current will be decreased. So heat loss will decrease. So to decrease the heat loss, we use the high voltage that transmit electrical energy over the long distances. I write here high voltage means lower current. Due to this, heat loss is reduced. Which in turn cost of cables as thinner wires can be used. Because the thin wire has small amount of resistance, due to which by increasing high voltage, the current also decrease and also the heat loss. Part B. Figure 10.1 represent a transformer. So here we can see that it's a transformer. It has two coils. This is primary coil and second one is secondary coil. The potential difference of primary coil is 120 volt while the secondary coil has 9 volt and the number of turns of primary coil is 4000. Part 1. The primary coil P has 4000 turns and an input of 120 volt. The secondary coil has output 9.0 volt. Calculate the number of turns in the secondary coil. Here we have to calculate the number of turns in the secondary coil by using formula that Vs over Vp is equal to Ns over Np. The ratio of secondary to primary voltage is also equal to the ratio of secondary to primary number of turns. It's NP. Here we have to find out NS. NS will be equal to NP multiplied by Vs over Vp. So number of turns of primary is 4000 multiplied by secondary voltage is 9 and primary voltage is 120. So the number of turns comes to be 300. So I write here it is equal to 300. Part 2. State a suitable material for the core of transformer. For the core of transformer, the suitable material is iron because it can be magnetized and demagnetized easily. So I write here iron is suitable material. Question number 11, part A, 1. One isotope of iridium-194 is represented by IR with atomic number 77 and mass number 194. This isotope decays by beta emission to a stable isotope of platinum Pt. Complete the nuclide equation for this decay. So here iridium decays through beta particle and it changes into stable isotope of platinum. So we have to balance this equation. We know that when an element emits beta particle, then its atomic mass remains same, but atomic number increase by 1 because beta particles are actually electrons with 0 and -1. So beta particles are represented by this. I write here 0 and -1. So we have to balance the atomic number and atomic mass on both sides of this arrow. I write here atomic mass that is represented by A. Left hand side and right hand side. First of all, I check atomic mass. Here it is 194. It should be equal to 0 plus which thing I add here so that the answer comes to be 194. So it will be 194 plus 0 which is equal to 194. It means that the atomic mass remains same and it is equal to 194. Second, we also have enter the value of atomic number. I write here G, that is for atomic number. On left side it is 77 and on right side it is -1. So which thing I have to add there so that the total becomes 77. I add here 78 so that 78 minus 1 will be equal to 77. So I write here it is 78. Part 2. The half-life of iridium-194 is 19 hours. A sample of iridium-194 has an initial count rate of 1100 counts per minute. Calculate the count rate from this sample after 38 hours. So we have to calculate the count rate after 38 hours. It is given that half-life of iridium is 194. So I write here half-life is the time during which half of the element of any isotope decays. So here half-life is 19 hours. It means that when 19 hours pass, the sample of iridium remains half, so that the count rate is also half. I write here after first half-life, count rate will be equal to 1100 divided by 2. It will be 550 count per minute. So we have to calculate the count rate after 38 hours. So when we divide 38 by 19, we get 2. It means that 2 half-life passes in 38 hours. So I write after second half-life, count rate will be equal to, after second half-life, the count rate will be half of this value. So I write here 550 divided by 2, it will be 275 counts per minute. So this is the count rate that left after 38 hours. I write here 275 count per minute. Part B. State two ways in which gamma emission differs from beta emission. So we have to differentiate between the gamma particles and beta particles. We know that the charge on gamma is 0. It means that the gamma particle is chargeless. It does not have any charge. While the beta particle is just like electron and they have charge. So I write here gamma particle have no charge, and beta radiation have charge. Second difference is that when an element goes gamma emission, there will be no change in atomic number. But when an element goes beta emission, there will be the change in atomic number, which means that the number of proton changes. You can see from here, it is 77 and it is 78. It means that the number of proton change in beta emission while it remains same in gamma emission. So I write here number of protons remain same in gamma emission while change in beta emission. So these are the main difference in which gamma emission differs from beta emission.